The clinking of wine glasses, soft jazz humming through the speakers, and the smell of rosemary and roasted turkey filled the room as I stood behind the table, smiling at a family that didn't know what was about to hit them. Thanksgiving at our house had always been picture perfect, or at least, Eleanor liked it that way. My mother-in-law was seated at the head of the table, her posture immaculate, eyes sharp even behind the rim of her wine glass. My husband Daniel sat beside her, relaxed, oblivious. The others, cousins, uncles, a few in-laws I barely spoke to, all chatted, passed plates, toasted gratitude. I cleared my throat gently. Before dessert, I thought it might be nice to look back on the last 5 years together. All the memories, all the milestones. The lights dimmed slightly as I clicked my laptop and projected the first image. But it wasn't a photo of birthdays or vacations. It was a scanned diary page. Handwritten. In Eleanor's unmistakable script. Called her principal. Told him she'd had a breakdown. That job offer will never come. There was a long, chilling pause. Utensils froze midair. Someone gasped. Eleanor blinked at the screen. Her glass tilted in her hand. I smiled gently. It turns out, not all memories are worth celebrating. My name is Rebecca Martinez. I'm 34 years old, an elementary school teacher in Austin, Texas, and for the last 5 years, I've been married to Daniel. He's a good man, kind, steady, the type of person who never misses oil changes or forgets to water the plants. He's also the kind of son who still calls his mother every Sunday, without fail. That was never a problem for me. I respected it. Admired it, even. Until I realized that Eleanor didn't want to share him, not with anyone. Especially not with me. I met Daniel at a district-wide education tech seminar. I was presenting on curriculum gamification, he was consulting on classroom software. We clicked instantly. 2 months later, we were dating. A year after that, we were married in a small garden ceremony with his mother sitting in the front row, lips pressed into a tight smile. At the time, I thought she was just reserved. Traditional. Maybe a little skeptical of how fast things had moved. I wasn't naive, I knew some mothers-in-law were difficult. I just didn't think mine would be dangerous. From the beginning, there were little things. Backhanded compliments. The way she'd accidentally call me Rachel, Daniel's college ex. Or how she'd bring up how organized Daniel's old girlfriends were, then glance meaningfully at our mail pile on the kitchen counter. Still, I brushed it off. Told myself she was adjusting. I made an effort. Every holiday. Every birthday. I brought wine, hosted dinners, smiled through the passive-aggressive comments about my job, my clothes, even my laugh. Daniel always said the same thing, she just has strong opinions. Don't take it personally. So I didn't. For years, I didn't. But then things started to happen that I couldn't explain away. The first was a job opportunity at a well-ranked charter school. I was recommended by a former professor and made it through 3 rounds of interviews. I was told I was a finalist. Then, suddenly, I was out of consideration. No reason. No feedback. Just we've decided to move forward with another candidate email. I was disappointed, but it happens. The second time it happened, different school, same outcome, I started to wonder. And then there were the friendships that drifted. The distant cousins who stopped responding to texts. The awkward pauses at family gatherings. A PTA mom I'd grown close to suddenly pulled back after Eleanor had just dropped by her salon for a haircut. But the real shift, the one that finally made the whispers start to feel like something more, was the night I overheard Eleanor talking to Daniel after she thought I'd gone to bed. I'm just saying, she said softly. She's intense. Controlling. Don't you feel like you're losing yourself a little? Daniel didn't push back. Not really. He just sighed and told her to stop. But she didn't. And from that moment on, I started paying attention. At first, I told myself I was being paranoid. That I was just tired, overworked, overly sensitive. I'd had a few rough months at school, behavior issues with some of my students, shifting curriculum standards, a surprise classroom audit. Maybe I was just projecting my stress onto Eleanor. But the feeling wouldn't leave me. It was like walking into a room that looked perfectly normal on the surface, furniture in place, windows open, sunlight streaming in, but somehow, you could still smell smoke. Something had burned. Something was still burning. You just couldn't see the flame yet. The signs became harder to ignore. I applied for a grant through an educational nonprofit. It was competitive, but I had the credentials. A week after my final interview, I received a polite rejection. That night, I found a crumpled printout in our home office trash can, an email I'd never seen before. It was sent from an anonymous account, full of vague accusations about my emotional volatility and inappropriate classroom boundaries. I didn't know how it got there. But I knew exactly who had the time, motive, and malice to write it. Then there were the comments from Daniel's family. His cousin Hannah stopped inviting me to her kids' birthday parties. His aunt, who used to hug me with both arms, barely made eye contact the last time we met. At a baby shower for Daniel's sister, one of the guests, someone I'd never met before, pulled me aside and said with a concerned smile, "I heard you're not working anymore. Everything okay?" I was still teaching full-time. I started noticing a pattern. Conversations shifted when I entered a room. People who once trusted me now treated me like a fragile object or, worse, a liability. The final straw came when I discovered that my mentor, Principal Harris, had received an anonymous voicemail just days before he rescinded a leadership opportunity he'd encouraged me to apply for. He wouldn't give me details, only said the school needed to be cautious. I knew then, I wasn't imagining anything. Someone was feeding lies about me into the air like poison, and I was the only one being asked to prove I wasn't sick. And still, Daniel couldn't see it. "She's just old-fashioned," he said. "She says things, but she doesn't mean harm." I almost laughed. I wanted to ask him, what exactly does not meaning harm look like? A ruined job offer? A friend lost? A false rumor spreading in every room I enter? But instead, I just nodded. Said I understood. Because I knew arguing wouldn't change his mind. Not yet. So I did the only thing that made sense, I started documenting everything. Dates. Names. Places. Patterns. I didn't confront Eleanor. I didn't even let her see that I suspected anything. I played the game her way. Smiled at her stories. Laughed at her jokes. Accepted her compliments with soft thank yous and lowered eyes. All while building the file that would one day destroy the mask she'd worn so well. And then, like fate had finally grown tired of waiting, everything changed with a single discovery in the guest bedroom. Eleanor had just left. She'd spent the weekend at our house under the guise of helping with fall cleaning, though she never lifted a single box. Mostly, she hovered. She made passive comments about our pantry organization, asked Daniel if he missed his ex's neat little spice drawer, and gently suggested that our guest bathroom could use a more feminine touch. The morning after she left, I was changing the linens in the guest room when I noticed the dresser was pulled slightly away from the wall. Odd, Eleanor never opened drawers, let alone moved furniture. I reached behind it to push it back and felt something jammed into the corner, a small leather-bound book, worn at the edges, the kind you'd find in a boutique shop next to overpriced fountain pens. It wasn't labeled. No lock. Just a thin black ribbon marking the place where she'd last left off. I opened it. The first few pages were innocent enough, lists, quotes, reminders. But then, halfway through, the tone shifted. The handwriting stayed the same, but the content? It was something else entirely. Told Daniel I had a bad feeling about her mental health. Used the word manic, it landed. Slipped a photo of Rachel into his planner. He didn't mention it, but I saw him staring at it. Seed planted. Called Amanda's principal friend. Told him Rebecca has a history of inappropriate classroom attachments. I kept it vague, but she won't get a second interview. I froze. My hand trembled slightly, but not from fear. From rage. Controlled, seething, calculated rage. My heart wasn't racing. It had slowed, deliberate and cold. I read on. Told Vanessa that Rebecca yelled at me during dinner. She seemed uncomfortable. Good. Suggested to Daniel that couples therapy might be useful, not for them, of course, but because I worry about her emotional regulation. He agreed. He always agrees, eventually. Each entry was a dagger. The timeline stretched back nearly 5 years. It aligned with every job I lost, every relationship that soured, every seed of doubt that had quietly taken root in Daniel's mind. And the tone, casual, like a gardener noting which weeds had taken. She hadn't just been manipulative. She had been methodical. She didn't yell. She didn't fight. She whispered poison into every open ear and smiled while doing it. I sat on the edge of the bed, the diary in my lap, and stared at the floral print wallpaper she'd once complimented as charming in a suburban sort of way. I wanted to scream. I wanted to burn every page. But I didn't. Instead, I pulled out my phone, opened my scanner app, and began taking photos of every entry, front and back, clear and readable. Then I emailed copies to a private folder, backed up the folder to the cloud, and renamed it something no one would think to open, 2020 tax references. When I was done, I carefully placed the journal back behind the dresser, exactly as I'd found it. I didn't say a word to Daniel. I didn't change my behavior. I didn't cancel Thanksgiving or fake a migraine to skip the chaos. No. I set the table. I planned the menu. I printed out place cards with her name in gold ink. I offered to host. Because now, for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't reacting to Eleanor. I was ready to reveal her. On my terms. In my home. With everyone watching. In the 2 weeks leading up to Thanksgiving, I became the version of myself Eleanor liked best, quiet, agreeable, endlessly accommodating. I texted her photos of the table settings I was thinking about. I asked if she had any food sensitivities I should plan around. I even offered to make her favorite cranberry orange chutney, the one she always insisted was too delicate for me to get right. She replied with a smiley face emoji and a comment about how good it felt to reconnect. Perfect. While Eleanor thought I was prepping for a family feast, I was constructing something else entirely, a final presentation. I spent late nights after Daniel fell asleep combing through the digital scans of her diary. I created a timeline with dates and cross-references, a job interview cancelled just 3 days after Eleanor had logged an anonymous call, a dinner party turned sour after she told our hosts I had sudden mood swings. One entry in particular stopped me cold. Suggested to Daniel that Rebecca was too overwhelmed to handle children. Planted the seed, he nodded. So that's where that came from. The quiet distance he'd kept every time I brought up adoption. The way he deflected conversations about fostering. All this time, I thought it was me, my fear, my unresolved grief. But it wasn't. It was her. Eleanor had reached into the heart of our marriage with a scalpel and started carving out the parts she didn't like. And now, I had the blueprint. I compiled it all into a digital folder, diary pages, voicemails, emails, screenshots, transcripts from friends who confirmed Eleanor's whispered rumors. Every lie, every manipulation, every string she had pulled. I created a simple presentation. No flourishes. No colors. Just the truth, stripped bare. Thanksgiving arrived like any other, cloudy, crisp, and deceptively quiet. I woke up early to roast the turkey and set the table. The candles were arranged in brass holders. The playlist was soft acoustic jazz. The wine breathed in crystal decanters. Family arrived on time. Hugs, coats, warm chatter. Daniel's uncle brought his signature pecan pie. His sister brought her 2 toddlers, who darted through the hallway shrieking with joy. Eleanor entered last, perfectly composed in a wine-colored shawl and pearls. She hugged me, tightly, with both arms. "Rebecca," she said, smiling. "The house looks beautiful." "Thank you," I replied. I wanted it to feel like home. Dinner was smooth. Predictable. Everyone praised the food, commented on how grown-up the kids looked, exchanged stories about work and neighbors and recipes. I sat beside Daniel, calm and pleasant, refilling drinks, passing plates, laughing softly. And when the last fork scraped against porcelain and dessert had been served, I stood. "Before we finish," I said, lifting my wine glass just slightly, "I thought it might be nice to share some memories from the last 5 years. This family's meant a lot to me. And I've spent some time putting together something I think we should all see." I walked over to the TV, connected my laptop, and dimmed the lights. The first image wasn't a photo of a birthday or a vacation. It was a high-resolution scan of a journal entry. Told Daniel that therapy might help Rebecca regulate herself. He agreed. The room fell still. Then, the next slide. Called Amanda's principal friend. She won't get a second interview. A few people shifted. Eleanor's wine glass trembled slightly as she set it down. Daniel leaned forward, brow furrowed. "What is this?" I turned to face them all. My voice didn't shake. "These are Eleanor's words. Her handwriting. Her thoughts. Her actions. For the last 5 years. Gasps. Confused whispers. A cousin looked over at Eleanor, who had gone pale. Every time I lost a job, a friend, a piece of peace, she was behind it. Quietly. Strategically. And I have proof. Eleanor finally stood. "This is outrageous." "That's private, how dare you?" I met her eyes. "I found the diary you left behind." I scanned every page. "I've matched the entries with dates, consequences, witnesses. You've manipulated this family for years while smiling across this table." Daniel looked at me. "Rebecca, is this real?" I nodded once. Then clicked to the next page. Her handwriting. Her dates. Her venom. All in black and white. "I didn't want to destroy anyone," I said, my voice steady. "But I won't let someone keep pretending they built a family while they were quietly tearing it apart." The room was silent. Every guest frozen. Every breath held. And Eleanor? She sat down slowly, face unreadable, caught in a storm of her own making. Daniel didn't speak at first. He sat perfectly still at the table, staring at the screen as if the words might shift into something else, something less damning, less calculated. But they didn't. They remained there, stark and undeniable. The truth doesn't flinch when finally exposed to light. "Is this," he began, his voice quiet, cracking, "this is Mom's handwriting?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The page currently displayed was dated 3 years ago, just 2 weeks before I'd gotten mysteriously ghosted by a school I'd been interviewing with for nearly a month. On it, Eleanor had written. "I told the district contact she seemed emotionally volatile." I didn't say unstable directly, just enough to make them cautious. "We'll see if it sticks." Daniel leaned forward and read it again. Then again. He looked over at Eleanor. "Did you really say this?" he asked, his voice now hollow. Eleanor didn't deny it. Not outright. Instead, she smoothed her napkin across her lap and said, "I did what I thought was best. For you." "For me?" Daniel echoed, disbelieving. "You've always been easily influenced," she said. "I could see the way she wore you down. The way she made you, small. She waved her hand vaguely. "I didn't want you to waste your life trapped in a marriage that didn't serve you." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut glass. Daniel's cousin Hannah stood first. Her voice was quiet, hesitant. "Aunt Eleanor, did you tell me Rebecca screamed at your grandkids? That she had episodes?" I turned to look at her. "I've never raised my voice to a child in this family. Ever. Hannah's face crumpled. I believed you were dangerous. That's why I stopped inviting you. Across the table, Daniel's uncle Will spoke next. You told us she was in therapy for delusions. That she had a history. Eleanor tried to laugh, a weak little puff of air. Well, It's all in the diary, I said, quietly. Every lie. Every manipulation. All documented by her own hand. Daniel stood slowly, chair legs groaning against hardwood. He looked at his mother for a long moment, as if seeing her clearly for the first time in his life. Did you ever care about her? He asked, voice low. Did you ever try? Eleanor looked up at him. I tried to protect you. That's what mothers do. Daniel shook his head. No, Mom. That's what control looks like. What you've done, what you've been doing, is not protection. It's sabotage. She opened her mouth. Closed it. Finally, she reached for her coat without a word, avoiding everyone's gaze. She stood, walked to the door, and left. Not one person followed her. The door clicked shut behind her like the end of a chapter none of us realized we'd been living inside. The silence was unbearable for a few seconds, then slowly, voices murmured, chairs shifted. Daniel sat back down and ran both hands over his face. I didn't know, he whispered, not to me, not to anyone in particular. God, I didn't know. I placed my hand gently over his. I know you didn't. He looked at me, really looked. You lived with that for 5 years. And you didn't say a word. I tried, I said. You weren't ready to hear it. I'm ready now, he said. If you'll let me make it right. I didn't answer. Not yet. Because making something right isn't a promise. It's a process. And after 5 years of war waged in whispers and shadows, I finally had space to breathe. To decide. And for the first time in our marriage, the silence around me felt like mine. The weeks that followed were unlike anything I'd ever experienced, quiet, slow, strangely weightless. It was as if a fog I hadn't known I was breathing had finally lifted, revealing the outlines of my life again. The air was clearer. Food tasted different. My thoughts no longer carried the weight of suspicion or the exhausting need to second-guess every shift in tone, every awkward pause at family events. The poison had a name now. And it had left the table. Daniel and I didn't talk much in those first few days. He was grieving in his own way, not just his mother, but the version of her he thought he'd known. I didn't press. I didn't explain. I'd done my part. I'd carried the weight for 5 years. Now it was his turn. After a week, he came to me on a rainy Thursday morning while I was folding laundry in the living room. He didn't say anything right away. Just sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the floor. I read the diary, he finally said. Every page. I nodded. I cried, he added, almost like a confession. For what she did. For what I let happen. For how long I didn't believe you. His voice cracked at the last part. I know, I said. I want to go to counseling, he said. Together. But also alone. I need to understand how I missed this. How I defended her while you were falling apart. It wasn't a grand gesture. It wasn't a plea. It was honest. Raw. Human. So I said yes. Not because I had forgiven him. But because healing doesn't always mean walking away. Sometimes, it means rebuilding, brick by careful brick, with someone who's finally willing to carry their share of the load. We started therapy 2 weeks later. The sessions were uncomfortable at first. Full of silences, realizations, pain neither of us had the words for. But slowly, the blame turned into responsibility. The guilt into accountability. And Daniel, my husband, my once passive observer, began to see me not just as someone who had been hurt, but as someone he had failed to protect. Eleanor, for her part, remained silent. She didn't call. Didn't write. Until one afternoon, an envelope arrived in our mailbox. No return address. Inside, a letter. 500 pages. No apology. Just a series of justifications laced with guilt. I was only trying to help. You never belonged in our family. He was slipping away from me. Daniel read it once and then placed it, unopened again, in a drawer. He didn't defend her. He didn't ask me to understand. He simply said, I won't let her write this ending. Months passed. I returned to teaching with more peace than I'd felt in years. I reconnected with friends who, embarrassed by what they'd once believed, began reaching out again. Some apologized. Some didn't. I accepted both. I wasn't looking for validation. I was building a life from the ruins, and it was enough. The next holiday, Thanksgiving, came again. This time, it was smaller. Warmer. No secrets tucked behind napkins. No performance. Just laughter, candlelight, and the smell of something real. Eleanor was not invited. Daniel didn't ask why. He simply poured the wine, carved the turkey, and sat beside me, not as a man caught between two women, but as someone who had finally chosen truth. And as I looked around that table, at the realness, the safety, the quiet joy, I realized something I hadn't said aloud before. The best revenge isn't rage. It's not confrontation. It's not even justice. The best revenge is clarity. It's standing at the end of the fire with your voice intact, your soul unburned, and your life finally, fully yours. And when the world once ruled by manipulation and silence crumbles behind you, you don't look back. You walk forward. With peace. And that's how I learned that sometimes, peace doesn't come from forgiving the person who hurt you, it comes from making sure they can never hurt you again. Have you ever had to face betrayal from someone in your own family? Tell me in the comments below. Like if this story hit too close to home. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge and bold truth.